What is poppin' YouTube? Do not draft a running back without legendary upside in the first few rounds of your fantasy football leagues. We're talking round one. Do not draft a running back in round one that does not have legendary upside. Now you might be saying to me, Caleb, what is legendary upside? And we're going to dive into kind of what legendary upside is today. Pat Crane put out a great article back in 2021 that I was using in pretty much every league that I was drafting in to kind of determine drafting a round one RB over a wide receiver. Now, when we're looking at this year's draft, it seems like everyone's kind of going wide receiver heavy super early on. And I think a lot of it hasn't been adjusted. But if you're going to take one of these running backs in the first round, you want to make sure that they have legendary upside. And so you're going to be saying to me, Caleb, what defines legendary upside? So let's first dive into the historical factors that contribute to these running backs and why people are not drafting them quite as frequently. So if we look at this graph right here, we're talking about win rate less than 8.3%. So they failed to deliver on their ADP rate. And so if we're looking at rounds 1, rounds 2, round 3, round 4, and round 5, we can quickly start to see that running backs have a higher bust rate compared to wide receivers. Now, it is just a little bit greater. Like, I mean, if you look at a bunch of these graphs, they're very close. They're very close. We're talking 15, 10% vantage points. I think the main thing that we have to consider is like after the middle rounds, the running back like value points are just dropping way off. Whereas we get to those later rounds, you can kind of still start to find some very quality wide receiver options. So like in the later rounds, that makes sense. But like, let's focus in on those first 3 rounds to kind of determine why those wide receivers are just performing at such a safer and higher clip than running backs. The answer to this graph is that just many of these running backs just flat out are busting. When we're looking at, of course, at like bust rate, like a sub 5% win rate, I mean, we're looking at rounds 1, rounds 2, and round 3. We're seeing running back is all across the board. I mean, we're almost at like 42% round 1. We're almost at 35% round 2. And we're almost at like 32% in round 3. So if you're in a 12-man league and 6 running backs are going off the board, we're looking at like 2 or 3 of those bad boys are going to be a league loser for you if you choose the right one. Now, granted, a lot of these factors come into play on why these running backs don't have legendary upside. We're talking, injuries could happen. All those factors, we're not necessarily talking about that. We're straight up talking about production. Like, let's say, for instance, now we're like looking at it from the range of you're drafting all these running backs. So like statistically, if you're drafting running backs in the first 6 rounds, one of them will be a total bust. Like, there's no ifs and doubts about it. Wide receivers in this range are far from perfect as well. So like these wide receivers tend to have like an 18% bust rate, but it's still a whole lot safer to invest in them than to load up on early running backs. Saying, okay, I've been tuning in, understanding a little bit about legendary upside running backs. So like, tell me, Caleb, what is the point to this video? The point of drafting early round running backs is really just finding these guys with the legendary upside. Running back bust rates are so bad in rounds 3 to 6, but they're actually worse in rounds 1 to 2. So if you're going to find a guy that's going to be league winning for you, you really have to be a sniper. You got to be a sniper, stealthy, shoot your shot, find this right running back to hitch your wagon to, because otherwise it could drive your team to last place, missing out on the playoffs. So especially if these running backs are busting at 40% of the time compared to bust rate of just 19% in rounds 3 to 6, with even worse bust rates, why aren't we avoiding running backs in the top 2 rounds? So like, you're saying to me, Caleb, this is why I'm drafting 2 wide receivers here. This is why I'm not even addressing the running back position. This is why like 0 running back works a ton, just because you're kind of mitigating the risk. You're still going to get the risk of the overall running back position, but you're able to address those wide receiver positions in those first 3 to 4 rounds, whether you're, drafting a few wide receivers, quarterback, tight end, these positions that have a little less bust rate. The issue then becomes a lot of people then like to do the anchor RB, the hero RB. So I'm going to post this little graph here where it kind of just explains the win rates in rounds 1 to 6. I just think it very much so shows like the win rates when we're talking about these running back win rates in rounds 1 through 6. It's just not great. It's just really not great compared to like the wide receiver win rates are so much better at producing like low double-digit win rates. And this comes back to why we're still sticking to this legendary rate. So since 2015, running backs have finished with 20% plus win rates. Wide receivers have just had 3. And running backs have 4 finishes with 25 plus win rates. Wide receivers have none. So based on all of these amazing stats, we can just clearly see the running back has the higher upside. The running back, if you nail down your amazing high leveraged running back, legendary running back that hits for you this season, all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that could win your league. Now, Austin Eckler was RB1 this last season, and I would not be calling him a legendary running back. It wasn't a legendary running back by any means. Legendary does not mean they get a workhorse role. This doesn't mean we're just going to look and say, yep, Derrick Henry's going to be a legendary running back because he's going to get the workhorse role. Like, we're looking at guys like a 2019 Christian McCaffrey, a 2017 Todd Gurley, these legendary fantasy football seasons where we look back and we go, wow, that guy actually did win me my league. When we look at like the last few seasons, really like 2020 when Alvin Kamara had his amazing touchdown season where he had his Christmas shoe game. Alvin Kamara emerged from the early rounds with a 20+% win rate. Running back upside is real and to a degree worth chasing, but we also just can't forget that you're really walking through a minefield as you're searching for it. We need to understand that even based on these, like talking about the bust rates and how inefficient these running backs are, so it might be safer to take wide receivers. We just kind of explained, though, that the fact is, even if you take wide receivers, if you miss on a wide receiver, like, it doesn't hurt your team as much, but you also don't have that same type of upside. Even if a wide receiver hits, it's not going to give you the same wins over replacement that one of these legendary running backs would. So when we're looking at guys that I believe have that type of legendary upside, we're going to look at a few guys. Really, in round one, I think there's just two guys that I'm targeting that I think have legendary upside. I think we can be talking about Bijan Robinson, number one. I think Bijan Robinson coming in as a rookie, we've talked about his receiving profile, his rushing profile. I think if everything lines up with the amazing pass game that the Atlanta Falcons do have, I do think we could be talking about Bijan Robinson in the same type of category as even kind of Saquon was on track in his rookie season to put up like a legendary upside type season. He did kind of relative on a points per game basis. When we're looking at like these seasons where we can look back, like I think Bijan Robinson could definitely get there. CMC, we've already proven it back in 2019 that he got there. He's had some injuries. He's had some situations that haven't been the most ideal in the Carolina Panthers, but all of a sudden put him full year on San Fran. We saw what he could do in a little short stretch last season. I put Christian McCaffrey in the same legendary running back type category. Then we're going to move on to round two, because I don't believe there's any other running backs. You might like Austin Eckler. You might like Nick Chubb. You might like Saquon Barkley all in the first round, but I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think any of those guys have legendary upside. It doesn't mean that in my home leagues and in my underdog drafts that I'm not going to end up with those guys at some point. I just can't be doing that, especially when we're talking your standard 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex type scoring format. So moving to round 2, the typical running backs are going to round 2. We got Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. The only guy that I currently look at in that kind of range that has legendary upside is Tony Pollard. Now, I do love some Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor just doesn't have the receiving work to get to that legendary upside, get to those passing, catching thresholds that we'd be looking for. Tony Pollard's the best of both worlds. He's going to be getting the volume. If he can get to 70% of the touches, Tony Pollard's going to be a legendary upside running back. And we've been praying for this day forever. They didn't sign a free agent. So if a free agent does come in, we're going to be a little bit more nervous about this. But the fact is, Deuce Vaughn, Malik Davis behind, no, can do. Tony Pollard is in my second round. That is another legendary running back. And like we said, really the legendary running backs start to run out in round 3. And so there's really only one other guy that I am targeting in round 3 that I think has legendary upside. And if this comes back to bite me in the butt, come for me. I don't care, because these are the guys that I'm viewing. Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs does need to get probably 200 rushing attempts and needs to get 70 receptions. But I think it definitely could be possible. He's the only other running back in that range that we're talking that I think has that elite level upside. I think if Breece Hall was fully healthy and didn't have Dalvin Cook in the backfield, I think we could also be making the argument that Breece Hall could be there. But coming off a torn ACL, adding in Dalvin Cook in that backfield, I just don't think he has legendary upside. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs does. And so I absolutely love Jahmyr Gibbs when I'm able to get him in the early third, mid third, especially like as my RB1. I think taking 2 wide receivers, like we just said, if you take 2 wide receivers because you're a little bit worried, you want to play it safe, cool. But you need to shoot for a legendary running back upside in round 3. Otherwise, based on the win rates, you're going to be just a little bit behind. So those are my guys that I'm targeting that I think have legendary upside. I know the term is kind of loose. But for me, based on seeing that, hey, later on in the draft, the rates are not great for running backs. The rates aren't great in the first, second, and third rounds. But if you can hit on one of these guys that has one of these elite level output type seasons where we're talking about elite level receiving, we're talking about elite level rushing upside with the touchdown upside, it's all good to go. So let me know down below, which of these legendary running backs are you looking to get? Do you think I missed out on any? Or any that you're saying, Caleb, I think this upside is just as great based on the situation? Would love to hear from you. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Trying to get to 500 subs by the time the season starts. Doing live mock drafts 5 to 6 days a week. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.